All right. Hello again, everyone. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome a very special girl to introduce her to you at the ICU Rehab Conference and her parents. So I'd like you to meet Reese. This is Claire, and this is Justin. Reese's little sister Brinkley had to go to school today, so she's joining us from school. But we are just thrilled to have Reese here to tell us about her experience and to hear her parents' perspectives on her ICU course, which is why we do what we do. The last question at our PEDS ICU track yesterday was actually to one of our respiratory therapists, Krista here, who we always joke because Krista was one of the first people to say, I'm not sure early mobilization in the PICU is going to be feasible. It's going to be a lot of work, and I'm not sure I'm on board with this. And now Krista is our biggest champion, and the question that was asked from the audience was, what made you change your mind? And her words were, you're going to meet my reason tomorrow. So here's her reason, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So Reese, just a little bit of background about her story. At the age of 7, she sustained a TBSA 35% burn in a house fire. She had a very severe inhalational injury, ended up with a left below the knee amputation, had severe respiratory failure with trach and vent dependence, renal failure requiring continuous renal replacement therapies. She was on VA ECMO and then transitioned to VV ECMO and was on ECMO for a total of 60 days. She had RVAD therapy for 491 days and then required a peripheral CO2 clearance device for 54 days. She was in our pediatric intensive care unit for 662 days. So our longest stay in the PICU by far. And I want to acknowledge Kristen Nelson. Kristen, can you say hi out there? She's already crying. Kristen cries. So Kristen Nelson was Reese's primary intensivist and champion, and we're really happy to have here and all of our primary champions from our PICU team. So let's go ahead and get started. Hi, Reese. Can everyone hear Reese? Can you say that a little louder?
Hi.
There she is. So Reese, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So tell us what you remember from the night of the fire.
The ambulance hitting a bump, and
what did you say?
they said that they got passengers.
Yeah. So the ambulance hit a bump, and you're like, they got passengers back here. So that's the first thing you remember after the fire?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. And do you remember something about your nightgown when you came to the emergency room?
I didn't want them to cut it.
Right. So that was one of the first memories that Reese has, is when she was in the emergency room, she did not want them to cut her nightgown. And that's the memory she has before her critical illness really started to become more severe and she became sedated. So Claire and Justin, I just want to ask you a little bit about the first few days in the pediatric intensive care unit. What was that like for you?
Well, it was definitely a whole new experience for us. And the only time we had been at the hospital was, of course, to have our children, and then we quickly went home. We had animal veterinary background, but and some of that, amazingly enough, carried over. But I think for me, the craziest thing was learning who was coming in your room. I had no idea the difference of a resident, a fellow, and then the doctor itself, and having to learn the hierarchy of everything. You know, it's not something you probably think about as doctors and nurses, but understanding that was, as who is the most important, who makes the final call on everything. It was just, and then the other scary thing was our child was so very sick. And having that changeover of a new doctor each week. It's very scary. You know, you get comfortable with that person for 7 days, and then bam, a whole new group come on the next week. So that was very difficult for us. So when nurse practitioner became our primary, they seemed that pool was smaller, so that helped us too, as well as the respiratory therapist.
Justin, what was it like for you when Reese was heavily sedated in those first several weeks?
Well, for us, we we didn't know what she could feel, what she could hear, what she knew, if Reese was still in there. You know, there were so many unknowns every day. And Claire and I sat in the waiting room very religiously. We couldn't sit in the room every day because there was so much commotion, so many noises. And, you know, we spent our time in the corner of the waiting room. We were right outside the door if they needed us. And I remember I'd go in and read every morning to Reese for about a half hour. His shift changed. And not long after Reese woke up, we started reading books again. And she said, "Dad, you read me that book already." And, you know, that hits home that, yeah, she did know something was going on. And you never know how scared your child is because you're so scared you don't know what's going on as well. And it was nerve-wracking. It would be for any parent. And we just used our patience and stayed loyal to Reese and spent all our time we could here and just religiously sat in the corner of the waiting room for about 4 months.
So what was it like after all of that time when Reese started to come out of her sedation? Did she have any issues with delirium, for example?
When she first woke up, you know, I told Sapna, I was like, it's not like the soap operas where they just wake up and break up a wedding. It definitely wasn't the case. You know, it was a long process, a difficult process for us. And even when she did wake up, she still didn't have the facial expressions that we long to see, you know, the smile that we miss so much. But when she first woke up that first day, she started swinging at a nurse, and mom role had to kick in, and I had to reprimand her because we weren't going to have that. I threatened to take the TV away if she continued to swing. But so that was tough to see because I knew that wasn't who she was, but she was still doing it and we had to address it. So
it's really hard to summarize Reese's course in a 25-minute interview. We could be here for days and weeks, but this is a question we talked about whether we should ask it, and I did want to ask you, she was very sick for a very long time. Did you ever feel like giving up?
You know, there was days that were bad. There were bad days. I'd have a bad day, Claire'd have a good day. We alternated back and forth. But we never gave up. We were lucky. Claire's cousin's a thoracic surgeon in New York City, so we relayed a lot of info from him. He's always the optimist. Everything's going to be okay. You know, we relayed a lot through our surgeon, through our doctors. If this is your child, what would you do? And our surgeon one day looked at us and said, "Keep going. Absolutely nothing changes." And that gave Claire and I a lot more hope. We knew Reese was there, you know, even if it was just a random hand squeeze or whatever. So we stayed positive the whole way through. We're farmers by trade, and we're optimistic that it's going to rain one day, that your corn's going to grow, that everything's going to be okay. And we just kept that attitude the whole way through. Everything's going to be okay. We're all going to go home as a family. Life's going to be back to normal.
Reese, what was the first thing you remember in the PICU?
I remember when I was asleep, Daddy read me the books. One of the books I remember was You Are Special.
Wow. And that was a cool book. That was one of your favorite books? Yeah. Kind of. So that was one of the good things. Tell me about all of the annoying things in the PICU.
I didn't like the noise a lot. It was hard to sleep. I didn't like the pull socks I was on. And then I didn't like the stickers on my belly.
Yeah?
And when people came into my room and just started doing stuff without telling me.
Yeah, that is annoying, right? So that was one thing that came up over and over again, when people just walk in and start doing things without telling you what they're about to do. So how did you fix that? Did you ask them to tell you before they started doing stuff? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we had lots of notes on our doors.
Lots of notes. And when you're in the unit for 662 days, you get to have a lot of notes on your door. So do you remember anything being scary, Reese?
I didn't like to sleep in the bed because lots of the procedures I didn't like happened in the bed, so I only slept in the recliner.
And you slept in the recliner every single night, right?
Yes.
Yes, because all of the bad things happen in the bed. And I remember we would round and we would talk about how her sleep was in the recliner, and that was known where she would sleep. So Claire and Justin, since sleep was challenging in the PICU, tell us about how a daily routine helped in her recovery and trying to get her back to a normal everyday.
We had a very strict routine. Reese was fortunate that our school district allowed her to, we had two things. We had a tutor, two different tutors for 2nd grade and 3rd grade, which she both passed in the hospital, by the way.
Woohoo!
And then, and then our 2nd year, we had a robot that she would, stream into school. So, and she could drive it through the school. So it was very important that she got up every morning and did her morning pills. She got dressed. I had clothes made into hospital gowns, so she felt like a normal kid. So each day she picked out her outfit, put on a new outfit, did her morning routine, went to school, had therapy, went to school again. So it was very important. But because we did that and we were so vigilant about that, when she came home, she transitioned so much better that she knew she was going to get up every morning. It wasn't, I feel very strongly about getting out of bed. I don't think you recover while you're sitting in bed. So whether she was sitting in a chair or sitting in her wheelchair, just as long as she wasn't in the bed, I was fine with that. And that meant getting out of the recliner because that was her bed.
So tell us about Reese's experience with rehab. We're at the rehab conference, and everyone here is very passionate about rehab. So what are the things that worked well, and what were the things that took some modification?
A rehab was a great struggle in the beginning, and there's a lady over there smiling. She experienced it all. But we had to start with a little bit of a barter system. You do this, we give you this. And that worked well for a while. And then we introduced OT and PT together. And as a team effort, you had something fun to do while you did something physical. And I think that played a lot into her success. And Claire was very adamant that 1 time a week was not going to work for therapy. So we got 5 days a week for an hour to an hour and a half. And I think that was huge because both specialists got to work together. They got 2 birds killed with 1 stone. And we got to really put Reese into motion a lot faster than she probably would have been otherwise. And I think if we only had therapy once or twice a week, there's no way she would have walked into the meeting today and came down the steps, sat down like a normal kid. I think our early movement was very special. And Reese had her moments too, where it was a half hour of priming her to start therapy. And she also knew that if you weren't her constant that came in there for therapy every day, she was going to play you like a fiddle. You were going to be sitting down playing Uno or something like that. You were not going to go in the hallway for a walk. You weren't going to go on a bike ride. You weren't going to do your stretches. She was very good at that. She could manipulate well. And sometimes I think some of the therapists that came in that were intermittent between our normals were almost to the point they felt bad for Reese because she would start a fake cry. She would owl about her pain, and she was good. She was good at working them. But Hallie and Joan did a tremendous job of getting the most out of her. They taught Claire and I a lot, and they gave us the ability to do a lot of things when they weren't around as well. And I think all those played in together to really advance her rehab quite fast.
So Reese, everyone's looking at a bunch of pictures in the background as we're talking. So tell us about some of your favorite memories, which I think some of them are seeing up there while you're in the PICU.
One of my favorites were when my dog Gator came to the hospital, and when my cow Pantene came.
Just, you know, her cow Pantene came to the hospital. No big deal. Yeah, so why don't we let...
And all the parties I had.
And the parties. There were lots of parties. So do you want to tell us a little bit about bringing a cow to the hospital and what was involved in that, Justin?
No, that was one of our barter system deals on therapy. We decided Reese could walk the back hallway and do it with somewhat of a smile, that maybe we would arrange something special. So the idea came up to bring her cow Pantene to Hopkins to see her because they hadn't seen each other for quite a long while. And it was a chance for everybody here that had been working with Reese to get a glimpse at her daily life at home as well. So we got everything arranged, set it up in the courtyard. They had a tent. It was probably the hottest day of June, but we, myself and a few of my friends brought Pantene from our house right down. We parked in the circle outside and had a lot of security there, and we got her off the trailer and right down the walkway we came, and we waited a little while for Reese and her team to get down there. And the funniest thing is, you drive a big truck and a trailer through the middle of the city, everybody's got their nose in their phone, they don't even see you go by. So no strange looks, nothing like that. But we had a great day that day. She had 300 or 400 people come down to see her, as we call her team, and got to visit with Pantene. We had a lot of fun. Pantene was well behaved. Reese was pretty well behaved. And then we loaded up and cleaned up and went home, and everybody else came upstairs for an ice cream party. So I think Dad got the short end of the stick that day. But I think that was very special and very instrumental in Reese's glimpse towards getting home, and everybody here's glimpse of seeing what Reese's norm is.
Reese, can you tell us about your bike?
I like to ride my pink bike around the unit, and it had a glow-up basket on the front, and it had 3 wheels, so it would be easy for me, and I didn't have to worry about falling over. And I always loaded my basket with candy and went the whole way around the unit and gave out candy.
So Reese, so we talk about ICU rehab making everyone happy. So watching a child on ECMO on a tricycle going around the unit with candy in her basket to hand out to all of the staff and the other parents is something priceless for everyone in the unit to experience. So all of us really experienced a lot. We're all going to start crying here by the end. Okay. You also gave out popcorn and snow cones. So I think there's a picture up there of that. So tell us about that.
I had lots of flavors, and I had lots of snow cone flavors. I had 2 different kinds of snow cone makers. One we never figured out how to use.
And Popcorn Snow Cone Day was really anticipated by everyone in the PICU, right?
So I would sell them on different days.
Yeah,
I
it was
sold
always a
them the
surprise.
whole week.
I love it, and we loved it too.
I think she made $300.
Not bad, not bad.
And the X-ray team was the best customer.
The X-ray team was the best customers, apparently, so that's good to know. All right, so we're going to switch gears on a little bit more of a serious note. So we talked about a lot of Reese's favorite memories, but obviously a young child in the hospital, especially for such a long time, has many reasons to be sad. So tell us how that was handled and what didn't work so well, and then what finally helped.
Well, we tried medication, and it was a pure disaster. We truly almost lost Reese. She had, I can't ever say the word, heparin-induced
Thrombocytopenia, so her
There you go.
platelet count was really low.
And that reacted from, I think it was Zoloft, was it? It was Zoloft and heparin. And so it was a very bad, I mean, Reese kept getting worse and worse. Her attitude was just terrible every day, and they kept saying, oh, within 3 weeks it'll get better, within 3 weeks, and each day it was worse. I mean, there were days that we literally said, Reese, we are leaving the room, we are sitting outside. If you're treating us this way, we are not going to be in here. And we would leave her in the room by herself. And finally we said, this has to stop. And so we stopped, we figured it out, we stopped and figured out that the best way for Reese was to just love her. We FaceTime, we had, she FaceTimed every event that anybody went to. For me, that would be difficult because I felt like I would miss out. But for her, she felt as if she were a part of it. She went to the Virginia State Fair, she went to the Maryland State Fair, she went to paint parties. She did all that via FaceTime. They stretched the rules in the ICU and allowed more family or friends to come. So over the summer, we had a program with all of her little friends and family back home that almost every day we had somebody lined up that would come and do an activity with Reese, whether it be a craft, whether it be play games, anything, tea parties, you name it. And that was the best thing for her. Medication was not the answer, and she still takes no medication and suffers from no post-traumatic stress from our event.
So tell us about parenting in the PICU. You've touched on this, but it can be a challenge. What was especially hard?
It's very hard to parent your child when somebody is looking over your shoulder and fearing that you are being judged. There are days that I had to say, can we please have a moment alone? And that's when I would really, put it to her. It's very hard, but you have to do it because she's sick, but being disrespectful is going to get her nowhere in life. People aren't going to want to take care of you and be with you if you're rude and disrespectful. So it was very important to Justin and I that we stay on her to continue to raise the child that we would have at home. And so we continue rules and maybe even harder rules for her, but it worked. It worked.
So we've talked about the therapists, the physical occupational therapists and their role. How about the child life and respiratory therapists? How did they play a role in Reese's recovery?
Well, child life was huge for Reese. Reese loved when Carrie came to the room. They were going to do a project. It was going to be fun. She was going to kick mom and dad out of there, and they were going to have their time alone. And that was good for us. We got a break. We could go get some lunch. If we had a meeting, we could arrange child life to come in, hang out, play cards, do crafts, whatever. And they got to talk about stuff that, maybe Reese didn't want to talk to mom and dad about. And they just got to be buddies, as I call it. Everybody had a good time when child life was in the room. And then when you shift gears to our respiratory therapist, that was a very small core group that had the training to use the machines that Reese was utilizing. So they became Reese's constant. They were constantly in the room, the same crew in the daytime, the same crew at nighttime. They developed a close bond, and some say that's frowned upon. I disagree with that because after 662 days, if you don't form somewhat of a bond, you have zero heart. And, so if we had a new nurse show up that hadn't had Reese before, our RT was there to offer advice or to help hurry the morning schedule along. They would sometimes aid in the bathing process so that we were ready for school, that we were ready for whatever the day was about. And Reese trusted her RTs because of that constant relationship that they had all the time. And sometimes she got a little too carried away with them with some of their fun and games, but I think that was very good for our care procedure.
Wonderful. So in the last few minutes, I'd like to focus a little bit on what was it like in the first few days at home. So after the 662 days, you finally get the opportunity to go home. Tell us about that transition.
We were very well prepared to go home. The ICU did a wonderful job preparing us for everything. But sleep doesn't just happen once you get home. She did sleep in her bed. We were very surprised. She went straight to her bed. We did not have nursing for about 6 weeks. So it was like bringing a newborn home again. Very little sleep for Justin and I. But she transitioned well. It was nice to have our freedoms, Of course, she was still on the vent for a while, so we, had to learn how to get that in the bathroom and all those things. But in about April, I kicked the wheelchair out of the house and she wasn't very happy. She said, how am I going to get to the bathroom? I was like, well, there's a kitchen on the way there, and you can stop in one of those chairs and take a rest if you need to. So she wasn't very happy with that, but I think that has helped her progression and getting stronger. We just gradually, and now it's out of the school. When she started back to school this year, she has no wheelchair. So we just have to push her, and that's the key. And that's the blessing of being home. We didn't have the rules, the safety rules that all the ICUs have, so we can push a little harder.
So Reese, what do you like to do for fun now?
I like to play with my sister. I like to ride the Kubota around, show my calf for 4-H, and I like to do 4-H. And then I also like to do the dance team at our dance studio we have in town.
That's amazing. That sounds awesome. So what is next for Reese?
So on November 20th, we will be having a kidney transplant. We have a living donor, and so we're all set and ready to go. And this is just the next step in our journey and our next step to having our normal Reese back. We're going to shed lots of equipment, and she's going to be a normal kid again after this.
That smile says it all right there. So, and the last question I have for all of you is, what are your biggest recommendations for the multidisciplinary staff caring for children in the PICU? What's the take-home point?
I think for us as parents and spending so much time in the PICU, either Claire or I or my mother was with Reese every day that she was in the PICU. And a very random day that the three of us couldn't be there, we had either another family member or a very close friend spend the day with Reese. And the good thing for us is once we got a few months in, we developed kind of a continuous care team. And, I tell Claire all the time, a 2-week patient's different than a 2-year patient. If you've got a 6-week plan, you don't want to change it 6 times through 6 doctors or 6 different staffing members. And I think once we developed the continuous care team, we kept advancing forward at a lot faster rate. And we started having weekly meetings where anybody on our care team could attend. They would discuss the plans for the next few weeks. Everybody could get on board. And then once we started doing that, it felt like we were progressing forward at a lot better rate. And the same for our PT and OT. That was our constant too. They knew Reese, they knew her tricks. They knew what they wanted to establish weekly, monthly with Reese and what the next step was. And I think that helped us a lot. And, for Claire and I, we were very involved in Reese's care. We learned you can open your mouth and say what's on your mind respectfully. Don't lose your temper. Don't get wild. You have a grown-up discussion. Don't act like a child. And, everybody, staffing-wise, is willing to stop and talk and explain and weigh out the options. And I think for Reese being here so long, that was really important for us. And without us having that kind of relationship in the PICU, we wouldn't have learned the skills that we needed to be able to take Reese home and care for her when we did. And that was a very adamant point. They wanted Reese home before her birthday. So Claire and I, we got our home nursing degrees pretty much. We studied and took tests and practiced at everything so that we were ready to provide the best care possible for Reese when she went home, because we didn't want to come back in a week. We wanted to come back in a month when her first checkup visit was. And, that's worked really good for us. Reese hasn't had any out of the ordinary hospital stays. So we've been very blessed with great staffing. Everybody developed a relationship with Reese. They were her friends here because her friends were back home at school. So she needed people to talk to that weren't mom and dad. She could joke around with, she could have fun with, and having so many constants in her daily routine was a huge part of that process.
Well, I think it goes without saying that we have a lot to think about coming away from this interview. I cannot thank you enough, and from all of us, for sharing your extraordinary story. You're an extraordinary family, and this has really been priceless for our education. So thank you so much. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes for some questions, and there's some microphones stationed on the sides if you want to come over and ask a question. Yeah, they might ask you for some questions. So there you go. You can hold it if you want, Reese, either way. Perfect. Any questions? All right, we'll give you a few minutes to walk over. Go ahead. Can someone hand her a mic?
Hi, my name's Jamie. I'm a speech therapist. So I'm curious how her talking went. I see she's wearing the Pastamere speaking valve. So I just wanted to hear how the speech and the swallowing went after, after coming out of the sedation and the ventilator and all of that.
I had to eat 3 mashed potatoes.
So that was a very difficult time for us because she woke up and she was so hungry. And at, I guess, 8, 7, I guess she was 7, she didn't quite understand why we weren't feeding her. And we kept telling her, you have food going in you, and she just couldn't grasp it. And all she wanted was mashed potatoes, mashed potatoes, mashed potatoes. So I see Janine is here, and we had a wonderful therapist that worked with us, and we went, that was one of our many trips that we took. But we were very blessed that Reese was strong enough and could speak over her trach, even when it was cuffed. She was very strong in that sense, so she never lost her voice. She always had her voice.
All right, we have a question over here.
As more of a comment, social service hasn't been mentioned throughout this, and I was just wondering if they assisted you with concerns as it related to being able to manage your, income and life issues beyond the hospital and caring for another child.
So that was addressed to us early on. It was very difficult for us because we, of course, were out of state, and so that affects a lot of things. But we were blessed. We had very good insurance. I guess later on we figured out, I went locally back home. She qualified for disability because of her leg. So I think for a short term, because she became a resident of Maryland, we became, we fell under Maryland. And so we, I think for the last year, were part of Maryland's disability. And then as soon as we went home, we went under Pennsylvania. But we were blessed with good insurance that we really had no issues with.
And a good network of people.
And we had a good network of people, for sure. For taking care of Brinkley, we had family that took care of our other daughter at home. And our farming community was very supportive of us, our local community. So I think we had meals at home for I had to shut them off after 6 months. I'm like, okay, I can cook.
Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing your story. My question is in relation to Reese's sister. I was just wondering if there was any kind of support peer groups available just for her to chat and kind of share her experience or support.
We've never had any of that. She has a cousin that you know, everybody takes for granted, or at least I think, you know, everybody's focus has always been on Reese, and you kind of forget about that other sibling. She would have been 3 at the time. Of course, she was there that night as well, uninjured. But we provided her with lots of love. Does she have some issues? I would say maybe we just recently had a fire at the farm, and she suffered from that. She was a little traumatized by that more than Reese. So there probably are some underlying issues that maybe we need to address.
Thank you.
One thing we do with Brinkley, and we tried to do it the whole way through, is she got one-on-one time with mom and dad. You know, I'd take her for a special trip, or Claire would take her to do something special. She got to go spend time with her friends a lot, and you know, that seemed to satisfy her a lot. Once she got to start coming to the hospital to visit Reese on a weekly basis, you could really see a change in Brinkley of, my sister's still here, I feel a lot better. You know, she greatly enjoyed those visits. But again, we have so many close friends at home that are all but family. They just swoop Brinkley up, take her with their gang, and, you know, tried to keep her as occupied as possible, keep her mind off of a lot of things if mom and dad were both gone at the same time. And I think all those factors played into it a lot, and we still do a lot of things just for Brinkley so that she knows she's an extremely special child as well.
I have a 2-part question. Was Reese seen by psychiatry while she was in the PICU?
Yes, she was, and she developed a weekly routine with that also, and that was good for Reese. They talked about a lot of different things. They even did a special project for Claire and I, talking about how much she loved us, enjoyed us, was thankful for us being around all the time, and she got to voice some of her concerns that, you know, maybe she was afraid to talk to us, and I think that was very, very helpful for her. When they started their weekly meetings, mom and dad were kicked out of the room, and they were one-on-one, and Reese really enjoyed that time also. It wasn't a struggle for her. You know, she always told us, Anna Georgia's coming at 3 o'clock. You need to leave. So.
And then for someone Reese's age, was it hard for her to understand the importance of early mobilization?
Yeah, it was hard for her to understand that she wasn't as strong before, that we needed her to get strong again so that she could walk. And, you know, that's why we had to offer up some prizes and everything else to really get her motivated at first. And then once she started to be able to go around the unit, and as she says, see her friends on the other end of the unit, go down the back hallway where you're not supposed to go, you know. that was a lot of self-motivation as well for her, that, hey, the stronger I get, the more I can go.
Thank you.
A question over here?
You had said that initially PT and OT were going to see Reese 1 to 2 times a week, and that wasn't appropriate for you guys, which sounds like the right thing. Was she participatory at that time initially? I'm kind of wondering what therapeutic activities they were able to do, and then how that progressed early on in her stay.
And, you know, early on it dealt with a lot of your splints, especially with OT, and, you know, moving the legs and things like that. Just, you know, your just any kind of mobility or movement. Yeah, stretching, things like that. That was the original. And then once she was able to sit up and walk, then they started activities within the bed, because it took till, I think, January before we got our prosthetic. You gotta remember, we got a prosthetic in the ICU. I mean, that is very unheard of too. And like, that's not something that is very common. So they were learning as we were learning. So we all had a lot to learn. The way we introduced a prosthetic to our child was by the movie, no, not Flipper, the Dolphin Tale. But that's how we introduced a prosthetic, because she had never seen one. So We did activities in the bed, and just it started up as just activities sitting up, sitting on a bench. I mean, she had lost all of that, so.
And then it sounds like you went straight from the PICU to home. Was there ever a rehab stay?
Totally skipped that. It was the rehab of mom and dad.
Best rehab ever. I think we have time for one more question over here.
I just wanted to thank you guys. I am blown away by your story. I was crying at times, and I just think you guys are such an exceptional family. I think that, you know, not every family would be able to last through this and have a strong marriage and be able to support both children and love both children. And I just really wanted to say that you guys are absolutely amazing and incredible, and your kids are lucky to have you, and you guys are lucky to have each other. So.
Take your microphone off now.
On that note, I think we'll go ahead and take a break. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks to all of you, and we'll see you at the posters and in the next session.